At any rate, let's talk a little about Army service, free service. At any rate, Hitler was rampaging through Poland, and they knocked the French out at Dieppe, and England was isolated. And when the Japs hit us in 1941 at Pearl Harbor, Winston Churchill said, Hitler and Hirohito just lost the war because they were counting on American ingenuity and our vast resources, steel, aluminum, everything to build aircraft, everything to build ships. And so there was not much going on, but right away, before I even was drafted, one of my friends who had enlisted was killed in Guadalcanal, and during the service I had 4 other friends I played football with and enjoyed their company in high school were gone. And that was a sad part. But at any rate, things didn't change too much, but when I come back from Portland, Corvallis, Oregon, where I was assigned to the 96th Infantry Division, things had really changed when I come back on a furlough in 43, in September 43. Tank plants replaced auto body shops. AC Sparkplug made more machine guns than they did air filters and spark plugs. And so that was a big change. Of course, there was rationing by the civilians, and there was a complete turnover of women leaving their homes and working in the factories. And the armed forces increased every year, and finally, just before the war ended, we had something like 12 million men under arms in Navy, Marines, Coast Guard, Army, and that was about 10% of the population. In 1940, the population was 120 million. So you can see the country, its people, everyone was fully involved. So you remember about rationing?
Hey, very much so.
Yeah. So you didn't go into what, 43?
43, yes.
Okay, so you saw the changes?
Oh, very much so.
Shoes? What else? Sugar, meat,
Flour, gasoline.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
You had to have a certain kind of a card to buy gasoline. If you had an A card, you just got the minimum to get back and forth to work. Then a B card, and if you had a C card, you could go anywhere. You had an unlimited amount of gasoline.
So when the country was at war, it was really at war, and the civilians had much more deprivation than they've had in Korea, Vietnam, in the Far East. It's just they're not, and we paid for it in war bonds. Everybody bought war bonds. Kids took their nickels and dimes and had little books at school, and they saved their pennies and their babysitting money until they had enough for, I think it was $16 or $17.50 for a $25 war bond that would mature in 10 years. So everybody is involved. So that's a difference between the wars we have now and the civilians' participation. And so it was all of us together, and it was feeling when you went in service that we're going to do this and get it right, and we're going to pursue our goals until we get them. That was the attitude of the whole Army that I was in. What about you?
Well, I guess the war, to me, I didn't get overseas, but I wanted to fly every time I was a little kid. In fact, I had my first airplane ride when I was 4 years old.
Wow.
At the Continental Airport out here. And a guy by the name of George King was the pilot. And a month later, George King crashed at Lake Harbor. A wing fell off. So I was glad I wasn't on that flight.
Good luck.
But my dad, being in the Air Force in World War, they called it the Army Air Corps in World War I, and he had albums of pictures of, he was stationed down at Ellington Field in Texas, and he had all kinds of pictures of different airplanes at that time. And one picture that I remember so much is the one over Houston with a formation of Jennies going across the sky.
Oh.
Well, I wore out that album. I really wore it out good. But when the war broke out, I wanted to get into the Air Force. At first, I was having some problems with blood pressure. And I finally had to be drafted. Got down to Detroit to, I think that's called Fort Wayne down there. And they said, there's nothing wrong with your blood pressure now, you're in the Army. So there I was. And I was taken to Fort Custer to the reception center. And there they had given me some other testing. And they came back and said, well, look, we can either send you to officer candidate school or to air cadet school. Well, that's what I wanted, so I got into air cadets. So they sent me down to Miami Beach. We stayed at the Betsy Ross Hotel on Ocean Drive, but there was five guys.
Men got the best, right? Yeah.
5 guys in one room in the summertime in Miami Beach is terrible. But we learned to march. We learned the left from the right and the right from the left, and how to back up and how to go forward and turn corners. So that was basic training. Well, they sent us to school up in Elkins, West Virginia for 5 months to teach us how to read and write and do arithmetic, I guess. But after that, after the 5 months, they sent us down to Nashville, Tennessee for classification to determine whether you're going to be a pilot, navigator, or bombardier, or be washed out. Well, the greater share of the bunch got washed out, but I was very, very lucky to get pilot training. And from there I went to a pre-flight down in Montgomery, Alabama, at Maxwell Field. And from there for a primary in Decatur, Alabama. And from Decatur I went to Greenwood, Mississippi for basic flying school. And I got to interject this at, it was Christmas time, we were changing stations from basic to advanced, and they gave us a 10-day leave. And so I called Alma, my wife, and I said, do you want to get married now or wait until after I graduate? She says, well, if your folks can get gas to get out to Lincoln, Nebraska, where she lived. We got married Christmas Day, 1944.
Wow.
And the only thing is, the thing only lasted 65 years.
Oh, that's kind of tough.
But at any rate, she joined me down at Blytheville, Arkansas, when it was advanced flying school. But the worst part of it was we had some bad weather and we were having to fly weekends, so I could only see her at nights for about an hour or two. But after we graduated, they sent us back to Lincoln, Nebraska, where her parents lived, and we had a pilot pool there, and they didn't know what to do with us because Germany had surrendered, and we had Japan yet to deal with. So they sent me down to Austin, Texas, for C-46 transition. And at that time, I just wanted to show this picture for the camera if they can get it. This is Alma and I in Austin, Texas in 1945. So we've had a good time down there, and actually the war did come to an end, and consequently they didn't need pilots anymore, so they sent us home. So we came back to Muskegon, and as we came back, I wanted to keep flying, so I stayed with the Air Reserve and also the Air National Guard. And eventually that paid off for me because I had an opportunity to sell airplanes, Beechcraft airplanes.
Oh,
And I was quite successful with that. And Alma said one day, she says, well, why don't we have our own business? So that's why we opened up Executive Air Transport here in Muskegon in 1959. And finally, I was flying quite a bit and trying to keep the thing going. And a guy came along, wanted to buy Executive Air from Grand Rapids, and I sold it to him. And I didn't sell the contract I had with Howmet Corporation. What we did, we sold these companies airplanes, and then I hired the pilots. We managed the aircraft for them, and that seemed to work out pretty good. And if we needed the aircraft for charter or something, we could use those aircrafts, and we would refund the money to the owners of it and keep the balance for ourselves. So that's pretty much my story, and I think as I look back upon my life that if I die tomorrow, I'm going to go with a smile.
well, that's great. How many children do you have now?
Well, we got 4, and my son was also a pilot, and we got 5 or 6 grandkids, and I guess about 6 great grandkids. So we've got really a nice family.